Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. We just had the Hungarian Grand Prix and it was a pretty eventful race. Not the best race of the season, but pretty good. I think I'd give it probably a 6 out of 10. Now, we had an extremely eventful race. We had Latifi setting a purple Sector 1 time in quali. A Ferrari absolute disaster class with their strategy again, and another Mercedes double podium. So we're going to go through the race and my driver ratings. As you can see, if you're not following me on Twitter, it's at Dan_OTG. We had 417 votes, which is the most we've ever had, so that's great. And you can have your say on the driver ratings, so we'll get straight into things. Now, before I get into the rest of the video, there's something that I wanted to quickly look at was this graphic from 107% F1. Now, this is the points scored in the last 6 rounds, so from Monaco to France, and this is going to be even more apparent after this weekend. Verstappen and Hamilton have got the first and second most amount of points, then it's SAINZ, PEREZ, Russell and LECLERC down in last out of the top 6. So he's clearly struggling, and I really think Ferraris need to start prioritising LECLERC over SAINZ if they want him to have a serious chance in this drivers' championship. So yeah, the first thing to note was the Ferrari strategy. Binotto was saying they weren't the fastest car. I probably agree they weren't the fastest, but they definitely could have won this race easily if they played the right strategy. We'll go into the tyres they used next, but yeah, they just played a really odd with tyre selection, and I think they panicked a bit, and I think they were hoping for rain, which never came. So let's have a look at the strategies that the teams used in this race. The Ferraris both chose to start on the mediums, and I was sort of expecting them to run these fairly long into the race and maybe do a one-stop, but a lot of people were pitting around lap 16, and LECLERC chose to come in at lap 21, SAINZ lap 17, and they both put on the mediums again, which I thought was a strange call because it kind of just sort of blows your strategy opportunity. Putting 2 mediums on, you're going to have to pit for a new tyre. There's no way that tyre's getting to the end of the race, and it just seemed quite early to pit. So yeah, strange strategy from Ferrari, and we know it didn't play out. LECLERC had to pit 21 laps on the first stint, then he could only do 18 on the second, had to pit for the hards, barely use those, wasted a stop, and then put on some old softs to finish the race, which were a much better tyre. But yeah, that's where they lost the race. If he didn't include that hard stint, I think they probably could have definitely got on the podium, if not won the race. But yeah, the likes of Hamilton and Verstappen, the 2-stop with the soft and then double medium was definitely the fastest strategy today. So this graphic is really interesting, and it tells us a lot about the tyres that were used. So the C4 was the soft tyre. This obviously can be used as a medium on some tracks, and I think we can tell this by the similarities between the C4 and the C3. The longest stint on the soft was 29 laps, and the longest on the medium was 32, which shows they were pretty similar, to be honest, in terms of durability. And now if we look at the fastest laps, on the soft, Hamilton managed to do a 1:21.3, PEREZ did a 1:21.9. Now when you take into account the different fuel loads, these are actually pretty similar. When you look across to the hards, they obviously lasted a lot longer, up to 48 laps, which Alonso did. But the problem with this tyre was a lot of drivers couldn't get this tyre working in a good operating temperature. LECLERC seemed to get this the best. He managed to do a 1:22.4, but then the second fastest lap was half a second slower than that with LANDO, who kept this tyre on for a while, so he obviously managed to get that going. But then if you look at the third fastest lap, it's RICCIARDO with a 1:25.9, and this just shows why the drivers that put this tyre on were struggling so much. So we'll get into the driver ratings, and I think Verstappen was a 10 out of 10. You gave him 8.6, which I think is reasonable. He obviously had that spin, but I think coming from 10th, where we had that issue in quali, and finishing the race in first, obviously it helped the Ferrari weren't as strong, But yeah, extremely solid race from Verstappen, and I think this is the stage now where it's getting unreasonable for the other drivers to catch him in the Drivers' Championship. Sergio Perez and Helmut Marko wasn't happy with his performance, seemed off the pace all weekend, and yeah, you gave him a 5. I think a 5 is reasonable. Finished in 5th as well, just not really there all weekend, couldn't seem to match Verstappen, and it feels like he has dropped off a little bit since the win in Monaco, but we'll see after the mid-season break and see if he can bounce back. Charles Leclerc, I'm giving him a 6 out of 10, you gave him a 6.3, and I think the problem with Charles was strategy. Although it's who do you blame, he obviously tried the hard tyre in practice, and I think he should have made the call personally that he probably don't think he could get the tyre working. Obviously it was a lot colder than it was in practice, which is probably why a lot of the drivers struggled to get this tyre up to temperature. But when you had the likes of Magnussen using this tyre very early on in the race and they could see it wasn't working, I think it was a bit of a gamble. And in the cool down room, Verstappen and Hamilton, when they found out Leclerc went onto the hards, were shocked. So I think everyone else thought this tyre was a no-go. So you have to blame the Ferrari strategist once again, not managing to put Leclerc on a winning strategy. Definitely didn't have the pace, he wasn't sort of rapid all weekend, but I think he could have potentially got a win and definitely a podium if he was there with the strategy. Now I'm giving Carlos Sainz a 5. I think he was quite similar to Perez, behind his teammate all weekend, wasn't really there to be honest, but nothing major to note home about. Again, not on the great strategy, but yeah, he'll hope to bounce back again after the mid-season break. Now Lewis Hamilton, and I think we're back to seeing his championship winning form. He beat the Ferraris today again. Mercedes double podium, which is great to see for them. They've clearly made a step up. A lot of the races recently, their podiums have been from people DNFing, but he did win the race today. Yes, Ferrari made a mistake on the strategy, but the team still won without the other teams DNFing, which shows that Mercedes clearly have a team that has a championship winning mindset, which I think is lacking from Ferrari at the moment. So yeah, 10 out of 10 from Hamilton, and I think if he managed to qualify a little bit higher, he had that issue obviously, then I think he probably could have got his first race win of 2022. George Russell next, and yeah, brilliant weekend from Russell, getting his first pole in Formula 1, he was absolutely chuffed, but I think yeah, he was obviously disappointed not to convert that into a win. And we're seeing now where he's been dominant over Hamilton this season, it looks like Hamilton does have an extra half a second a lap now over Russell, so it makes me think, was Hamilton experimenting at the start of the season with all these different sort of floors and wings to try to get that Mercedes up there, and now they've got the same car, Hamilton's just that level above Russell. He's obviously his first year at the team, and yeah, he's still got a lot of improvement to do, and he's done an extremely great job to stick it on pole, but I think he knows he's going to be the second driver of the season now, but they'll look to get as many points for Mercedes in the Constructors. I think that's probably what they're going to aim to win. They aren't going to win, well, unless they can do something amazing over the mid-season break and start winning most races. I don't think they're going to have a chance to catch Verstappen at all. But there could be potential to sort of outscore Red Bull in the Constructors if Verstappen's winning races, but the two Mercedes are second and third on the podium and even get a few race wins, then they will definitely close up to the Red Bull in the Constructors. Lando Norris next, and I gave him an 8 out of 10, you guys gave him a 6.4, and I think this is tough for Norris because it's so hard to tell what he's doing. He's sort of in the midfield on his own, just ahead of everyone most weekends, but he doesn't have a car that can catch the top 3 teams. He always sticks the car above where it should be in quali, So in the race, when he drops back, when those cars inevitably catch them, he just seems to he never seems to fight it because it's not worth it to ruin his tyres and his race. So he's always better than the rest. Now, it's hard to rate him because he basically has a flawless race. That's the best you'd expect him to do, and he's never going to catch the top 3 teams in that car. But I really want to see McLaren get close to those top teams because I think Norris has the sort of pace and consistency to start getting podiums and race wins quite a lot. You saw last season he got quite a lot of podiums. I hope he can do it this season, to be honest. What started as a promising weekend for Ricciardo, ended pretty poorly, finishing P15. Wasn't too far off Lando in quali and in the practice sessions, but not great in the race. Had the contact with Stroll, which gave him the 5-second penalty, and he did the soft, medium, hard strategy. I think he did more laps on the mediums than he did the hards, which is never going to play off optimally. So pretty poor. I gave Ricciardo a 3 out of 10. Probably looks worse because of that penalty and the fact he was on the hards, but not a good weekend for Ricciardo when I think his pace was there and he probably could have got some points this weekend. Fernando Alonso, and we've just heard the news that he is going to Aston Martin. I might do a video about that soon, but not going to speak on that too much. He was fighting Ocon quite a lot in the race. He got pushed nearly into the pit wall, which might explain why he's leaving the team if Ocon doesn't really care for his teammates anymore. And gave him a 7 out of 10. You guys gave him a 6.5. Finished in 8th place. So for the 4th quickest car, pretty much where you expect him to be. But he's clearly still got the pace and fighting, and he thinks he can fight for championships at Aston Martin next season. So that's definitely going to be interesting one to keep an eye on. Esteban Ocon, I gave him 7. You guys gave him a 4.5, which I thought was pretty harsh, considering he finished in 9th just behind his teammate. But kind of consistent Ocon as he's been all season, finishing where the car probably should be, which is good news for the team. Although Otmar did seem to think they would be on the podium this race, which clearly didn't work out to be. Now, Haas were probably my team of the weekend that disappointed the most. Magnussen finished in 16th. After they brought the upgrades last race, they looked really quick, and I'm not sure what happened. I don't know if this low speed, high downforce track just doesn't suit their car, but they didn't seem to have any pace all weekend. I gave him a 3, you guys gave him a 3, and you could tell the car wasn't working because they both finished down there towards the bottom, but they'll look to do better, potentially a different, a more power track potentially with that Ferrari engine. Mick Schumacher doing slightly better than his teammate, finishing 2 places higher in P14, but not too much to write home about. Solid drive, but I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. Might be a bit harsh if the car was that sort of poor, which you would think as they both did finish down there together, but he'll look to put this result behind him, and I think the Haas team can look forward to the next half of the season. They're one of the teams that have bought the least amount of upgrades, so that might suggest that they're looking to sort of push on in the second half of the season, or they could be one of the teams that are putting their sole development into the 2023 season. Now, it's hard to put where this AlphaTauri is. I don't think it's a great car. I think it's probably between the Alfa Romeos and Aston Martins, but I think Gasly probably did a pretty solid job this race. I think he finished in P12, dominated his teammate, but I gave him a 7 out of 10, you guys gave him a 5.3. It's just not where we expect that AlphaTauri and likes of Pierre Gasly to be. There's rumours of him last year going to Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, and his stock just seems to have dropped massively. Now this car can't seem to get any pace in it at all, to be honest. Yuki Tsunoda finished last place in P19 and was a lap behind Nicholas Latifi. Now, he did have the spin, but after that he was on the soft tyres and he just didn't seem to get any of the gap back. I gave him a 3 out of 10. You guys gave him a 4.7, which I think is extremely generous, but I think it could even be a lot lower. This could even be a 2 or a 1. This was definitely his worst race of the season. Now, he started so well, so I really hope that he can take the break, gather his composure, and just sort of hopefully get back to as he started the 2022 season, which was extremely strong. And I think that AlphaTauri has been the biggest disappointment in terms of car performance for me this season, so I hope they can turn this around and get a car that can fight back in the midfield for some points. Now, Valtteri Bottas, not too much to write home about. Has having a pretty solid race. I gave him a 6 out of 10, but he was the only driver to have a retirement, so no points for Bottas on this side of the garage. And yeah, they're another team that have fallen back this season. They looked a lot quicker in quali and practice, and the reason they said this was because in the first races of the season they were one of the only teams to have the car underweight. A lot of the cars had their cars over the weight limit, and they've managed to keep their car under the weight limit. And as the season's gone on, a lot of the teams have managed to bring their cars down in weight. And I don't think Alfa Romeo have done too much development, so I think this is where they have slowly dropped back in the pack. And yeah, Bottas isn't really fighting for points anymore, where he was fighting for the sort of P7s and P8s earlier in the season. Pretty strong weekend from Zhou, finishing in 13th. Giving him a 6 out of 10. You guys gave him a 5.1. And yeah, I think consistent, solid race from Zhou. Not too much to say on this performance either. I think just summarising his first half of the season, I think he's been really impressive. He's obviously had some incidents and a lot of reliability issues, which hasn't been his fault, but he has definitely impressed me. And if I was in charge of Alfa Romeo, I'd be wanting to keep him on for the next season. He seems extremely mature in his driving, and I think he definitely has a future in Formula 1. Sebastian Vettel next, I gave him a 7, and he finally got points. It seems like him and Stroll are fighting for P10 and 11 between those two positions every race at the moment. But yeah, he's obviously announced his retirement, and Alonso is going to be filling that seat in F1 next season. And it's clearly just not what Vettel wants to be doing, is fighting for 1 point at a race. They obviously had that new rear wing, which allowed them to have a lot more downforce, which showed how much more competitive they were this race. But we'll see if that rear wing gets banned, or otherwise if the other teams copy it, because it's a clear bend in the rules, and the FIAs have sort of followed them through the development and said it's legal. So if it is legal, the other teams are just going to copy it. So I don't think they'll have that advantage for too much longer. But it shows what forward thinking the Aston Martin have. They've also got the new factory and brand new facilities. So it'll be interesting to see if they progress through the development a lot faster than the other teams. Lance Stroll, now he's been managing to keep pace with Sebastian Vettel and actually beat him in quite a few races. So I think he's been having a pretty solid season, you'd have to say. It's just that Aston Martin doesn't seem to have the pace to fight for points really at the moment. But I think a 6 out of 10 is fair for Lance Stroll. Alex Albon next, and I'm giving them a 6 out of 10. I think it's fair to say the Williams is the worst car at the moment at the mid-season break. But yeah, Albon's been able to do some really great things with that Williams this season. Managed to get points where he sort of hasn't deserved to at all. But yeah, he'll be happy with his performance this season, and I'd like to see him in Formula 1 next year, whether that's at Williams or if he gets a chance to move to another team. Now, Nicholas Latifi, the last driver, it was looking so promising for him on the Saturday. Got the fastest lap in FP3, and then in quali, he was doing his lap, got a purple sector 1, PB on the middle sector, and then just had an awful final sector. And it showed on the last lap, he just had a massive snap of oversteer, which just lost him so much lap time, and he didn't manage to get a good qualifying position. and he obviously had that good qualifying position at Silverstone, so that's probably where his strengths lie. But in the race, yeah, dropped back to the back of the field, and I gave him a 4 out of 10. Now, finally, let's look at the driver standings after the Hungarian Grand Prix. And yeah, just look at Verstappen. Maximum points every weekend since Great Britain, and all the other drivers are just falling so far behind. I think he's won the championship now. I really don't think he's going to make that many mistakes or have that many DNFs. And I don't think there's a driver that's that close to him, unless after the mid-season break, Ferrari completely prioritise Leclerc and drop SAINZ just for strategy, and they don't make any strategy blunders. There may be a slim potential they might be able to catch him, but yeah, I think that's gone now, to be honest. If you look at Leclerc, since Austria, it's absolutely flatlined in terms of points, and it's just been so inconsistent. The next driver is PEREZ. Yeah, he's still increasing, but just sort of at a much slower rate than Verstappen. And if you look at the likes of Hamilton, which is the dark blue line below the yellow one, which is SAINZ, you can see a very slow start to the season, but that is the line that is increasing the most, sort of at the greatest rate at the moment, which is what you want when you're in Formula 1. You want to be carrying the momentum, and you'd rather have a car that has the potential to win races. We're only halfway through the season now. I think that slow start means that they won't be able to, the two Mercedes won't be able to catch the Red Bull, but I think they can definitely catch the Ferraris and beat the Ferraris. So yeah, the next thing is the gap between where Hamilton is and the lower drivers. Now, I think these are the midfield teams. They won't be able to have a chance at sort of fighting for those podium positions really, unless some of them can improve. Lando has had sort of good consistency recently. You can see that line steadily going up since the sort of poor results in Monaco, Baku and Canada. So yeah, let me know what you thought of the race, and yeah, any comments you have down below. And thanks for watching to the end of the video. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you all again soon. Cheers.